The blizzard was a vertical wall of white noise, swallowing the small, high valley where Elias had chosen to wait out the end of the world. For 30 years, he had been the curator of a silence no one knew was broken, the last true guardian of the Order's final, terrible secret. He was ready for the end to come swiftly, cleanly, or not at all. He was not ready for a frantic knock on his heavily fortified door at 3 o'clock in the morning. He didn't know why she was running. He just saw the blood streaking the pristine snow, the freezing rain plastered against her thin jacket, and the raw, animal fear in her eyes. Saving her was instinct, the old, forgotten code kicking in. He dragged her shivering body inside the small mountain sanctuary, stripped the soaked clothes, and treated the lacerations on her arms and neck. She was barely conscious, perhaps 18, and clearly terrified of the sanctuary's deep shadows. She said her name was Ilara. For the first few days, Elias maintained a professional distance, treating her like a temporary charge. But the silence stretched, and the mountain became her prison. Ilara was unnervingly quiet, her eyes too old for her face, constantly observing, cataloging. She claimed she'd been hiking with a group who vanished, that she fled an accident she couldn't remember. Elias was a kind of man who dealt in truth hidden behind layers of carefully constructed history, and her story tasted like dust. He felt the prickle of danger 2 days after the rescue, while changing her bandages. She was unconscious from the fever, skin pale and translucent. There, just beneath the smooth curve of her left collarbone, was a mark. It wasn't a mole or a scar. It was a deeply etched, stylized symbol, a broken hourglass. The insignia of the amnesiacs, the shadow cult dedicated to eradicating the Templar bloodline and seizing the knowledge Elias protected. They were precise, patient, and they only used disposable, untraceable agents. He realized, with a horrifying, stomach-lurching certainty, that the girl he had pulled from the freezing river was a living knife meant to open his own throat. Elias did not react. He covered the mark and went back to his duties. But everything in the sanctuary changed. The soup he prepared felt like a sacrament. The conversation felt like a high-stakes chess match. He started leaving small, innocuous details exposed, an ancient, untranslated Latin text on a table, a poorly locked box containing what looked like worthless iron rings. He was waiting for her move, studying the way her hand paused near the rings, the way her breath hitched when she saw the Latin. The true torment, however, was the dawning affection. Ilara was intelligent, quick to grasp the complex languages Elias taught her to occupy the time. She helped him tend the small, isolated garden, and she laughed, a rare, genuine sound, when he told her mundane stories of his strange, sheltered life. Elias had lived in isolation for so long. The presence of youth was intoxicating, even knowing it was laced with cyanide. He began to wonder if the amnesiacs were so ruthless that they would use a soul that seemed genuinely fragmented, genuinely redeemable. This inner conflict became his undoing. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after the rescue, Elias led Ilara deeper into the stone structure, down into the oldest part of the building, the place he had sworn to protect, the archive. It wasn't gold. It was a vast, subterranean library of maps, coded journals, and astronomical observations dating back 900 years. This was the source of the Templars' real power, not military might, but contextual truth. "This," Elias murmured, gesturing around the cavern filled with illuminated manuscripts and parchment scrolls, "is why I live up here. This is why others want me dead." Ilara's eyes were wide, but focused. They were no longer the eyes of a terrified girl. They were the eyes of a trained asset, assessing the vulnerability of target. "It is beautiful," she whispered, reaching out to touch a scroll case. Elias stepped back, letting the cold stone press against his spine. "They sent you to kill me and steal this." The air in the archive instantly chilled, thicker than the mountain air outside. Ilara froze, her hand hovering inches from the ancient knowledge. The mask of fear and confusion vanished entirely, replaced by a devastating clinical composure. "I was 7 years old when they started training me," she said, her voice completely level. "They told me I was saving the world from the lies of the Crusader heretics. I know 7 ways to break your neck, and 3 ways to silence your alarm system. I know the weakness of your heart, Elias. It is loneliness." She pulled a thin, wickedly sharp stiletto from the lining of her boot, a knife specifically designed for silent dispatch. This was the second major turn. Elias hadn't expected the immediate, stark confession. He had expected denial, a struggle, a moment of pleading. He simply nodded, resigned, but curious. "Why now?" he asked calmly. "You had days. You could have done it in your sleep." Ilara's composure fractured just slightly, revealing the conflicted girl underneath the killer. "They tracked me. I was supposed to report success 3 days ago, but you showed me kindness, not the monstrous devotion I was taught to expect." She leveled the knife, her hand shaking. "I have to choose. And if I don't kill you, they kill us both." "Who is they?" Elias pressed. "Who leads the amnesiacs? Who ordered the theft of this archive?" Ilara hesitated agonizingly. The name she spoke next caused Elias's blood to run colder than the mountain snow. It wasn't a shadowy foreign leader or an ancient cabal. "Victor Varick," she choked out. "He financed them. He claimed he was rescuing the true history. He was the only name I knew." Victor Varick. Elias knew the name intimately. Victor had been his contemporary, a scholar and historian who had dedicated his life to serving the order, before Elias had been forced to banish him a decade ago for dangerous fanaticism. Victor was not dead. He was merely waiting, hidden in plain sight, using this shadow cult as his proxy weapon. The greatest danger wasn't external destruction, but internal rot, twisting the very ideals of the order into something toxic. The third turn arrived not with a whisper, but with a sudden, dull thud from above. The sanctuary's heavy external door was being forced. "They're here," Elias whispered, looking at Ilara. "Victor knew the moment you failed to report. They followed you here." Ilara looked down at the stiletto in her hand, then at the man who had saved her life only to realize she was his executioner. She looked at the vast, silent collection of human history around them. Elias did not move to fight her, nor did he plead. He merely watched her, granting her the dignity of choice. "This archive," Elias said, his voice ringing with ancient authority. "It's not power. It's a warning about the cycle of zealotry. Victor only wanted to rewrite history into a weapon." The sounds of heavy boots on the stone floor above grew louder. They were coming down the narrow staircase. Ilara's face hardened, but not with murderous intent, with resolution. She tossed the stiletto, not at Elias, but against the furthest stone wall. The small metallic clang echoed through the archive. "I was sent to kill the heretic," she said. Her eyes locked on the ceiling where the first shapes of the amnesiacs were starting to descend. "But I can't let him win." She had betrayed the man who saved her, but in that instant, she chose to betray the masters who forged her. She ran toward the staircase, not running away from the danger, but directly into it. Elias saw her grab the heavy iron pole he kept near the door and swing it with the trained, lethal efficiency of a soldier, catching the lead agent across the temple. Ilara was buying in time. A few precious seconds of furious, desperate redemption. Elias did not hesitate. He spun toward the central pillar of the archive, where the most essential small volume, the Ledger of First Principles, was housed. He snatched the thick leather book, holding the true key to the Order's continued survival. Then, drawing a detonator he'd carried for years, meant only for this contingency, he activated the small charges built into the ceiling supports. The charges were designed not to explode, but to collapse the mountain's fragile structure above, burying the entire archive, the history, and the enemy beneath 10,000 tons of rock. He glanced back once. Ilara was overwhelmed, but still fighting, a small, fierce storm of defiance against the approaching figures. She met his eyes just before the roar started, and, in that fleeting moment, he saw the acceptance of her sacrifice. Elias fled the collapsing sanctuary, scrambling out into the blinding white snow. The ground shook violently behind him, the sound of ancient stone grinding against bedrock echoing like the final judgment. The sanctuary, the archive, Ilara, and the amnesiacs were gone, buried, silenced. He walked for hours, the cold biting through his thick cloak, the ledger clutched tight to his chest. He was the last guardian again, but now he carried the crushing weight of a young life willingly extinguished for his survival. He had known she was a killer. Yet he had opened his sanctuary and his heart to her, creating a debt that could only be paid in blood. Elias had saved her from the river, but Alara had saved him from the darkness. He stopped, finally, at the edge of the valley, looking down at the smoke rising from the fresh scar on the mountain face. Victor was still out there, possessing nothing, but more dangerous than ever. The archive was dust, but the truth was safe. He realized then that the fight was not about artifacts or secrets. It was about the impossible choice between trust and survival. And in the end, it was the conflicted heart of the girl sent to murder him that proved to be the Order's only true salvation. Elias adjusted his cloak and continued walking into the uncertain morning, alone, burdened, and utterly unforgiven.